I'm Sarah, 28, and I just rang my parents' doorbell for the first time in 5 years. The door swung open to reveal my mother's shocked face. If you're here to ask for money, you can leave, she said without even a hello. I smiled and replied, actually, I'm here to offer. Then I handed them a document that changed their lives, but not the way they expected. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt rejected by the people who should love you most. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Standing on that familiar porch, I could practically feel the years dissolving around me. The same chipped paint on the front door, the same wilted petunias in Mom's flower boxes that she never quite managed to keep alive. But I wasn't the same broken girl who'd left this place 5 years ago with nothing but a backpack and a heart full of hurt. Dad appeared behind Mom, his face cycling through surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been shame. "Sarah?" he said, like he wasn't quite sure I was real. "Hi, Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the memories flooding back. "May I come in?" They exchanged one of those married couple looks loaded with unspoken communication. Mom stepped aside reluctantly, and I walked into the living room where I'd spent the first 23 years of my life. The same beige carpet, the same outdated furniture, the same family photos lined up on the mantel. Except now I noticed what I'd been too young to see before. How worn everything looked. How the paint was peeling around the window frames. How the couch cushions sagged from years of use. "You look," Dad started, then trailed off, taking in my designer blazer, my confident posture, the way success had changed everything about me except my eyes. "Different," Mom finished, her tone suspicious. "What do you want, Sarah?" I reached into my leather briefcase. The same briefcase that had been mocked in business meetings until my ideas started making millions, and pulled out a manila envelope. The paper crinkled slightly as I held it out. "I told you," I said, meeting both their gazes steadily. "I'm here to offer something." Dad's hand shook slightly as he took the envelope. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, ready to snap. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, and somewhere down the street, children played in a yard where parents actually wanted them. "What is this?" Mom asked, eyeing the envelope like it might bite her. "Open it," I said simply. And that's when everything changed. 5 years ago, I stood in this same living room, but the conversation couldn't have been more different. Back then, I was 23, fresh out of college with a business degree and dreams bigger than this small town could contain. I'd been living at home for 6 months, saving every penny from my restaurant job to fund my startup idea. "It's ridiculous, Sarah," Mom had said, waving my business plan around like it was contaminated. "Food trucks? Really? You have a perfectly good degree and you want to sell tacos from a van?" Dad nodded along from his recliner, not even bothering to look up from his newspaper. "Your mother's right. It's time to get serious about your future. Find a real job with benefits." "This could be a real job," I'd insisted, my voice desperate with the kind of hope that only comes from being young and believing in yourself. "I've done the research. The market analysis shows." "Market analysis," Mom scoffed. "Sarah, you're living in a fantasy. Your cousin Mike has a job at the bank, steady income, health insurance, retirement plan. That's what adults do." I'd spread my laptop on the coffee table, pulling up spreadsheets and demographic studies I'd spent months compiling. "Just look at the numbers. Food trucks are booming. With the right location and menu, I could make more in a year than Mike makes in 3. "Could," Dad emphasized, finally joining the conversation. "That's the problem with your generation. All dreams, no reality. You think everything's going to work out just because you want it to." The presentation I'd rehearsed for weeks dissolved into pleading. "I just need $5,000. It's for the initial equipment and permits. I'll pay you back with interest within 18 months, I promise." Mom's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. $5,000? Sarah, we don't have that kind of money lying around. And even if we did, we're not about to throw it away on this pipe dream. "It's not a pipe dream," I'd said, hating how my voice cracked with frustration. "I've talked to successful food truck owners. I know what works and what doesn't. I have a solid business model." "What you have," Dad said, folding his newspaper with deliberate precision, "is an expensive fantasy that you want us to fund." The words that came next still echoed in my dreams sometimes. Words that carved themselves into my soul and refused to heal. "Honestly, Sarah," Mom had said, settling into her chair with a sigh that suggested I was exhausting her just by existing, "when are you going to accept that you're not special? Not everyone gets to live their dream. Most of us have to settle for ordinary lives and ordinary jobs. The sooner you realize that, the happier you'll be." That was the moment something inside me died. and something else was born. The fight that followed was nuclear. Not the kind of argument where both sides make valid points, but the kind where everything ugly gets dragged into the light and nobody emerges unscathed. "You're being unrealistic," Dad had said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. "We've supported you through college, given you a roof over your head. It's time for you to support yourself like an adult." "I am trying to support myself," I'd shot back, gesturing at my laptop full of business plans. "That's exactly what this is about. Building something that's mine." Mom stood up, smoothing her dress with sharp, angry movements. "You know what your problem is, Sarah. You think you're better than us. Better than this town. Better than steady work. Better than the life we've provided for you." "I never said that. You don't have to say it. It's written all over your face every time you talk about this ridiculous business idea. Like working an honest job is beneath you." "An honest job?" The words exploded out of me. "You mean like the honest job you had before you quit to stay home and judge everyone else's choices? Or the honest job Dad complains about every single night at dinner?" The slap came fast and sharp, my mother's palm connecting with my cheek before I even saw it coming. The sting was nothing compared to the shock, the sudden understanding that we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. "Don't you dare speak to us that way," she hissed. "Not in our house, eating our food, using our electricity." I touched my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from my skin. "Fine," I said quietly. "Then I won't." "What's that supposed to mean?" Dad asked, but there was something in his voice that suggested he already knew. "It means I'm leaving." The words came out steadier than I felt. "Tonight." Mom's face went through several expressions before settling on disbelief. "You're being dramatic. Go to your room and cool off. We'll talk about this tomorrow." "No," I said, already heading for the stairs. "We won't. Because I won't be here tomorrow." "Sarah, stop." Dad's voice followed me up the stairs. "You can't just leave. Where would you even go?" I paused halfway up, my hand gripping the banister so tight my knuckles went white. "I don't know. But anywhere is better than staying in a house where my own parents think I'm worthless." "We never said you were worthless," Mom called after me. I turned around slowly, looking down at their upturned faces. "You didn't have to." In my room, I packed everything that mattered into a single backpack. Photos, important documents, the few pieces of jewelry my grandmother had left me. Everything else could stay. I didn't want reminders of the girl who'd been foolish enough to believe her parents might support her dreams. When I came back downstairs with my backpack, they were waiting by the front door like guards. "This is ridiculous," Mom said. "You have nowhere to go and no money." "I have $300 in savings and a working brain," I replied. "I'll figure it out." "And when you come crawling back?" Dad asked. I looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his face, burning this moment into my memory. "I won't." Those were the last words I spoke to them for 5 years. Until today. The first year was brutal. I couch-surfed with friends until I exhausted everyone's patience, then moved into a studio apartment that was really just a converted closet with a hot plate. I worked 3 jobs, serving coffee at 5 a.m., data entry during the day, and bartending until 2 a.m. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for 8 months straight, but I never forgot the taste of rejection. It flavored everything, made every small victory sweeter, and every setback fuel for the fire burning inside me. The food truck dream didn't die. It just evolved. I spent my lunch breaks researching other opportunities, other ways to build something from nothing. I haunted the library, reading every business book they had, taking notes until my hand cramped. One night, while serving drinks to a table of tech bros celebrating some investment deal, I overheard them talking about a new app that connected freelance workers with small businesses. They were laughing about how simple the concept was, how the founder had started it in his garage and was now worth millions. That's when it clicked. Not food trucks, technology. Specifically an app that solved a problem I knew intimately, finding reliable, affordable household services. During my months of apartment hunting and penny pinching, I'd watched friends struggle to find trustworthy cleaners, handymen, and pet sitters. The existing platforms were either too expensive or too risky. I started small, really small. I spent my day off visiting every small service business in town, cleaning companies, dog walkers, handymen who worked out of their trucks. I offered to help them find customers through a simple website I'd built using YouTube tutorials and sheer determination. For every successful booking, I took a small percentage. 5%. That was it. Just enough to keep the lights on while I refined the concept. The breakthrough came when Mrs. Patterson, who owned a house cleaning service, told her sister in Portland about this brilliant girl who'd doubled her client base in 2 months. The sister called me that afternoon. "I don't know what you did for Grace," she said, "but she hasn't stopped talking about you. Can you do the same thing for my landscaping business?" 6 months later, I had 40 service providers across 3 cities using my platform. I'd moved into a real apartment with actual walls and bought my first decent business outfit from a thrift store. But the real validation came when my biggest competitor tried to buy me out. They offered $50,000 for my little website, clearly not understanding what they were looking at. I said no. Not because $50,000 wasn't life-changing money, but because I finally understood what I was building. This wasn't just a business. It was proof that the girl my parents had dismissed as a dreamer could create something valuable. Something they'd never seen coming. By year 3, HomeLink had expanded to 12 states. What started as a simple website had evolved into a comprehensive platform that connected homeowners with vetted service professionals. We handled everything from one-time cleanings to major renovation projects, and our rating system had become the gold standard in the industry. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' rejection had pushed me into an industry they would have understood, helping people maintain their homes and properties. But they'd never see the connection, because they'd never believed I could see anything through. I hired my first employees that summer: a customer service manager, a software developer, and a marketing coordinator. We moved into real office space, complete with a conference room and a kitchen stocked with something other than ramen noodles. The calls started coming in from investors, venture capital firms who'd heard about the home services girl, who was disrupting an entire industry. I took meetings wearing the same thrift store blazer I'd bought years earlier, not because I couldn't afford better, but because I wanted to remember where I'd started. "Your growth metrics are impressive," one investor said, sliding a term sheet across the polished conference table. "We're prepared to offer $2 million for 30% equity." I stared at the numbers, remembering the $5,000 my parents had refused to risk on my dreams. $2 million, enough to expand nationwide, hire the team I needed, and prove once and for all that their daughter wasn't the failure they'd believed her to be. "I'll need to think about it," I said, even though every cell in my body was screaming yes. "Of course, but don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come around twice." That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking the city lights and thought about the girl who'd packed everything she owned into a backpack. The girl who'd chosen uncertainty over the crushing weight of her parents' low expectations. She deserved to see this through. I called the investor the next morning and accepted their offer. Within 6 months, HomeLink was operating in 37 states. Within a year, we'd processed over 1 million service requests and generated $12 million in revenue. But the moment that really mattered came on a Tuesday morning when I was reviewing expansion plans. My assistant knocked on my office door with a strange expression on her face. "Sarah, there's something you should see." She handed me a printed article from our town's newspaper. "Your old neighbor sent this to our general email address. She thought you might be interested." The headline read, "Local couple faces foreclosure after medical bills mount." Below it was a photo I recognized immediately. My childhood home, with a notice of default sign planted in the front yard like a gravestone. The article detailed my parents' financial struggles: Dad's heart attack 2 years earlier, the medical bills that insurance didn't cover, Mom's reduced hours at work to care for him. They were 6 months behind on their mortgage and facing eviction within 30 days. I stared at that photo for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. Not sympathy exactly, but opportunity. The kind of opportunity that only comes when you have the power to change someone's entire world. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The mortgage company was surprisingly easy to work with. When you're offering to pay cash for a distressed property, banks don't ask too many questions about your motivations. "The Thompson property on Maple Street?" the loan officer confirmed, pulling up the file on his computer. "Yes, we've been trying to work with the current owners, but they're significantly behind on payments. Are you interested in purchasing it as an investment property?" "Something like that," I said, signing the paperwork that would make me the official owner of my childhood home. "I'd like to keep the current tenants if possible. Work out some kind of arrangement with them." "Tenants?" He looked confused. "These are the original homeowners. They've lived there for over 20 years. "Not anymore," I said, sliding the signed documents back across his desk. "Now they're my tenants. And I think it's time we discuss their lease terms." The whole transaction took 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which my parents continued living in their house, unaware that their daughter, the one they'd dismissed as unrealistic and unprepared for the adult world, now held their future in her hands. I spent those weeks planning. Not just what I would say, but how I would say it. This wasn't about revenge exactly, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. This was about truth. about showing them exactly who their daughter had become while they weren't paying attention. On the day the sale finalized, I drove through my old neighborhood for the first time in 5 years. Same rundown houses, same cracked sidewalks, same sense of dreams deferred and opportunities missed. But I wasn't the same person who'd left this place with nothing but anger and determination. I parked across the street from my childhood home and sat there for 10 minutes, watching my parents move around inside the house that was now mine. Dad looked frailer than I remembered, moving carefully like someone who'd learned not to take his health for granted. Mom was cleaning the windows with the same obsessive attention to detail that had driven me crazy as a kid. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. "It's time," I said. "Prepare the notice of new ownership and the lease agreement we discussed. I want everything ready for tomorrow." "Are you sure about this approach, Sarah?" she asked. "It's unconventional." "Everything about my relationship with my parents has been unconventional," I replied, watching Mom adjust a curtain in the window. "But this time, I'm the one setting the terms." The next morning, I put on my best suit. Not the thrift store blazer, but a real designer piece that cost more than my parents spent on groceries in a month. I gathered the documents that would change everything, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell of the house where I'd once believed I belonged. The look on Mom's face when she opened the door was everything I'd imagined, and more. Shock, confusion, and just a hint of the fear that comes when your past shows up uninvited at your front door. Have you ever experienced a moment when you realized your family completely underestimated you? What did that feel like? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let me know if you've ever had to prove your worth to the people who should have believed in you from the beginning. Dad's hands trembled as he pulled the papers from the envelope. The first document was simple enough, a notice of ownership transfer. But as his eyes scanned the details, I watched the color drain from his face like water from a broken glass. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. This says, you own our house." "That's correct," I replied, settling into the same armchair where I'd once curled up to read as a child. Funny how different the room felt when you owned everything in it. "As of yesterday, I'm your new landlord." Mom snatched the papers from Dad's shaking hands, her eyes darting across the legal language. "This is impossible. Sarah, what kind of sick joke is this?" "The kind that comes with a 30-day notice to quit if rent isn't paid on time," I said, reaching for the second document in the envelope. Which brings us to the next item we need to discuss. The second paper was itemized carefully. Every loan they'd ever asked for, every emergency they'd guilt-tripped me into funding over the years before our fight. $5,000 for Dad's back surgery that insurance should have covered. $3,000 for Mom's car repairs that mysteriously cost twice the original estimate. $8,000 for their vacation to help them recover from stress. $16,437, I read aloud. "That's what you borrowed from me over the years, with interest calculated at the prime rate plus 2%, the same rate you would have paid a bank. Your current balance is $22,891. Mom's face went through several colors before settling on an alarming shade of purple. "You can't be serious. Those were family emergencies. That money was given freely." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone and opening a folder of saved emails, "I have documentation showing that each transfer was specifically labeled as a loan in my bank records. I also have text messages from both of you promising to pay me back as soon as things turn around." Dad collapsed into his recliner, the same chair where he'd dismissed my dreams 5 years ago. "Sarah, we don't have that kind of money. You know we're struggling." "I do know that," I agreed, "which is why I'm prepared to offer you a solution. You can continue living in this house, my house, under a lease agreement. Your monthly rent will be $800, which is actually below market rate for this neighborhood." $800? Mom's voice cracked. "Sarah, we can barely afford the utilities." "Then perhaps you should have thought about that before you taught me that family doesn't help family pursue unrealistic dreams." I stood up, smoothing my skirt with the same deliberate precision Mom had used during our last fight. "Consider this my business proposal to you. You have 48 hours to decide." Dad looked up at me with eyes I'd never seen before. Not angry or dismissive, but desperate. "What happened to you, Sarah? This isn't the daughter we raised." I paused at the front door, my hand on the handle. "You're absolutely right, Dad. The daughter you raised would have accepted your limitations as her own. She would have gotten that safe job at the bank and spent her life wondering what might have been. Lucky for me. That daughter died the night you told her she wasn't special enough for her dreams. The woman who replaced her built an empire. What do you think will happen next? Will Sarah's parents accept her terms? Or will they try to fight back? Drop your predictions in the comments below and let me know if you've ever had to set boundaries with family members who underestimated you. The phone call started 6 hours later. Sarah, honey, please call me back. Mom's voicemail began. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let's sit down and talk about this like adults. The second message, an hour later. Your father is having chest pains. I think the stress of this situation is affecting his heart. Please, we need to work something out. By evening, the tone had shifted. I don't know what kind of person you've become, but this isn't how family treats family. Your grandparents would be ashamed. I deleted each message without fully listening, but I saved them all, just in case. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my downtown office when my assistant buzzed in. Sarah, there's a gentleman here who says he's your father. He doesn't have an appointment, but he seems upset. I looked up from my computer, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. The modern furniture that cost more than my parents' monthly income. The framed magazine covers featuring articles about 30 under 30 entrepreneurs to watch. Send him in, I said. Dad appeared in my doorway looking smaller than I remembered, wearing his best shirt, the one Mom had ironed for job interviews that never came. His eyes widened as he took in my office, the obvious success he'd never imagined possible. Hello, Dad, I said, not getting up from behind my desk. I have to say, this is the first time you've ever visited me at work. He stood there for a moment, clearly trying to process the disconnect between the daughter he thought he knew and the woman sitting in an executive office that screamed success. Sarah, we need to talk. We talked yesterday. You have 36 hours left to make your decision. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. But please, sit. Tell me what brings you to my office. He perched on the edge of the chair like he might need to run at any moment. This is really your company? You really built all this? HomeLink has offices in 15 cities now, I said, turning my laptop so he could see our website. We process about 50,000 service requests monthly and employ over 200 people directly, with another 3,000 independent contractors using our platform. His mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. I had no idea. No, I agreed. You didn't. Because knowing would have required you to believe I was capable of something beyond your imagination. Sarah, about what we said 5 years ago, what you said, I corrected, was that I wasn't special, that I needed to accept an ordinary life and an ordinary job, that my dreams were unrealistic fantasies you weren't willing to support. He flinched like I'd slapped him. We were trying to protect you from disappointment. Were you? I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Or were you protecting yourselves from having to admit that your daughter might actually achieve something you never could? The silence stretched between us, filled with years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. The house, he said finally. Please, we'll pay whatever rent you want. Just don't make us leave. $800 a month, I repeated. Plus, the outstanding loan balance can be paid off at $50 monthly until satisfied. Those are my terms. And if we can't afford it? I met his eyes steadily. Then you'll learn what it feels like to have nowhere to go and no family to help you, just like I did. Mom showed up the next day with reinforcements. My Aunt Linda, who'd always been her emotional backup in family drama. Sarah, this is going too far, Aunt Linda announced before she'd even fully entered my office. Your parents are good people who made a mistake. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive them. I gestured for both women to sit, noting how Mom's eyes kept darting around my office, cataloging the expensive furniture and artwork. She was finally seeing what her daughter had built, and I could practically watch her recalculating everything she thought she knew about me. Aunt Linda, I said warmly, it's so nice to see you again. Mom, you look well. How did you both get past security, by the way? I told them we were family, Mom said, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Interesting approach, considering how that conversation usually goes in our family. I opened my laptop and pulled up our company's latest financial statements. But since you're here, would you like to know what forgiveness looks like in my world? I turned the screen toward them, showing revenue numbers that made Mom's breath catch audibly. Last year, HomeLink generated $42 million in revenue. My personal net worth is approximately $8 million. I employ people in 15 states, and we're expanding internationally next quarter. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. That food truck you thought was so ridiculous? It would have been my entry-level business. A stepping stone. Aunt Linda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Success doesn't give you the right to be cruel to your parents. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Success gives me the right to set boundaries. There's a difference. Mom leaned forward, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Respect, mixed with fear. Sarah, we made mistakes. We can see that now. But we're still your parents. Are you? I asked quietly. Because parents support their children's dreams. Parents believe in their children's potential. Parents don't tell their kids they're not special enough for success. We were scared, Mom whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Your dreams were so big, and we'd seen so many people fail. We thought we were saving you from heartbreak. Instead, you taught me that I couldn't count on the people who were supposed to love me most. I closed the laptop and folded my hands on the desk. But you know what? Thank you. Both women looked confused. Thank you for rejecting me. Thank you for forcing me to find my own way. Thank you for teaching me that the only person I can truly depend on is myself. I smiled, and it felt genuinely peaceful. Because if you'd supported me, I might have settled for that little food truck. I might have stayed small and safe and ordinary. Sarah, Mom started. The lease agreement is on the table, I interrupted, sliding a folder across the desk. Take it or leave it. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to decide. After they left, I sat in my office watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and orange. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. The reporter from Business Weekly is here for your interview about the Inkshare magazine cover story. 5 years ago, I'd begged these people for $5,000 and a little belief. Now reporters wanted to know the secret to my success, and my parents were learning what it felt like to need something from someone who held all the power. Life had a sense of humor, after all. The call came at 11 p.m., just as I was reviewing contracts for our European expansion. Mom's number flashed on my phone, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Sarah? Her voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. Can you come over, please? There's something we need to tell you. I found them sitting at the kitchen table, where we'd shared so many uncomfortable family dinners. The lease agreement lay between them, unsigned, next to a shoebox I recognized from Mom's closet. We'll sign, Dad said without preamble. The lease, the payment plan for the loan, all of it. Good choice, I said, settling into my old chair. It felt strange being back in this kitchen as an adult, as their landlord instead of their dependent child. But first, Mom said, her hands shaking as she opened the shoebox, there's something you need to know about why we reacted the way we did to your business plan. Inside the box were documents I'd never seen before. Business registration papers, loan applications, bankruptcy filings, all bearing my father's name, all dated from before I was born. I tried once, Dad said quietly, his voice barely audible. Before you were born, I had a construction business, small jobs, residential work. I thought I was going to be somebody. I picked up one of the loan documents, seeing numbers that represented someone's shattered dreams. What happened? Everything, Mom said, wiping her eyes. The bank called in our loans during a recession. We lost the business, the house we'd bought, our savings, everything. I was pregnant with you, and we had to move in with my parents for 2 years while your father worked as a day laborer. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like the weight of their history was pressing down on all of us. The night you came to us with your business plan, Dad continued, all I could see was history repeating itself. I saw you making the same mistakes I'd made, risking everything on something that could disappear overnight. So you decided to crush my dreams before life could do it for you, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. We thought we were protecting you, Mom whispered. We thought if we could convince you to want less, you'd never have to feel the kind of failure that nearly destroyed us. I stared at the bankruptcy papers, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. They hadn't rejected me because they thought I was incapable. They'd rejected me because they were terrified I was too much like Dad had been. You know what the difference is between you and me? I said finally. They looked at me expectantly. You let one failure define the rest of your life. I used your rejection to fuel mine. I gathered the papers and handed them back. Your fear became my motivation. Dad's shoulders sagged like I'd taken the last of his fight. We were wrong, Sarah. About everything. You're not ordinary. You never were. No, I agreed. I'm not. But it took you telling me I was nothing for me to discover I could be everything. The silence that followed felt different than all the silences before it. Not angry or bitter, but sad in a way that acknowledged how much time we'd all lost. The lease stands, I said finally. $800 a month, $50 toward the loan. But there's one more condition. They waited. I want you to help other people who are where I was 5 years ago. Young entrepreneurs who need support instead of discouragement. You can start by volunteering at the Small Business Development Center downtown. Mom's eyes widened. You want us to help other dreamers? I want you to learn the difference between protecting someone and limiting them. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. Maybe it's not too late for you to remember what believing in someone feels like. 3 months later, I received an unexpected call. Dad's voice on the other end was excited in a way I hadn't heard since childhood. Sarah, you have to come see this. There's someone I want you to meet. I found them at the Small Business Development Center, huddled around a laptop with a young woman who couldn't have been more than 22. She had that same desperate hope in her eyes that I'd once carried, that same combination of terror and determination that comes with betting everything on yourself. This is Maria, Dad said, beaming with a pride I'd never seen directed at anyone but directed toward someone else's dream. She's got this incredible idea for a mobile pet grooming service. Show Sarah your business plan, Maria. As I listened to Maria's presentation, the market research, the financial projections, the careful planning that reminded me so much of my younger self, I watched my parents in wonder. Mom was taking notes, asking practical questions about insurance and licensing. Dad was nodding along, offering suggestions about vehicle modifications and route planning. They weren't crushing her dreams. They were helping her build them. What do you think? Maria asked when she finished, her voice tight with the anxiety of someone whose future hung on other people's opinions. Is it realistic? I looked at my parents, seeing something in their faces I'd never thought possible, the ability to believe in someone else's potential instead of protecting them from their own. I think, I said slowly, that with the right support, and maybe a small business loan, you could have your first truck operational within 6 months. Maria's face lit up like sunrise. Really? You think it could work? I think, I said, meeting my father's eyes across the table, that dreams are only unrealistic if the people around you don't believe in them. After Maria left with a stack of resources and a timeline for her next steps, the three of us sat in the now empty conference room. She reminds me of someone I used to know, Dad said quietly. Someone we failed, Mom added, her voice heavy with regret. Someone you taught to be stronger, I corrected. Maybe not in the way you intended, but you taught me that I had to believe in myself because no one else would. That's not the worst lesson a parent can give their child. Dad reached across the table and took my hand. The first time he'd touched me with affection since I was a child. I'm proud of you, Sarah. Not just of what you've built, but of who you've become. I'm proud of who you're becoming too, I said, squeezing his fingers. Both of you. Mom wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Do you think we could have Sunday dinners again? Maybe Maria could join us sometimes. And other people we're helping. I looked around the conference room where my parents were learning to nurture dreams instead of crushing them, where they were discovering that believing in someone's potential was a gift rather than a risk. I think, I said, that sounds like the beginning of a real family. 1 year later, I stood in the same kitchen where everything had started, but it looked completely different. The walls were covered with photos of the entrepreneurs my parents had helped through the development center. Maria, with her successful pet grooming business, David with his food truck that was so profitable he was opening a second location, Jennifer with her consulting firm that had just landed its first major corporate client. Dinner's ready, Mom called, setting a casserole on the table that actually smelled good. Cooking had never been her strength, but she'd been taking classes at the community center, approaching it with the same methodical determination she now brought to helping young business owners navigate licensing requirements. The dining room was crowded. Maria and her girlfriend sat next to David and his wife. Jennifer had brought her teenage son, who was already planning his own business for when he turned 18. My parents moved between them all like gracious hosts, genuinely interested in their struggles and celebrating their victories. Sarah helped us understand that fear and protection aren't the same thing, Dad was explaining to Jennifer's son, who'd asked about the difference between realistic planning and dream killing. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is believe they can handle more than they think they can. After dinner, as we cleaned up, Mom pulled me aside. I need to ask you something, she said, her voice serious. The house. Are you planning to sell it eventually? Make us move? I looked around the kitchen where I'd learned to cook, where I'd done homework at the counter, where I'd once believed my parents' love was conditional on my willingness to dream smaller. No, I said. This is your home. It always was. I just needed you to understand that home is something you build together, not something you get to keep by tearing other people down. She nodded, tears in her eyes. The rent payments, the loan, we want to keep making them, not because we have to, but because it feels right. Like we're finally paying you back for all the support we should have given you from the beginning. Keep the money, I said. Use it to help other people get started. Consider it an investment in making sure no other kid leaves home believing their parents think they're not special enough for their dreams. Later that evening, as I drove back to my downtown condo, I thought about the girl who'd packed everything she owned into a backpack and walked away from the only family she'd ever known. She'd been looking for someone to believe in her potential, not realizing that the most important believer would always be herself. But she'd also been looking for home, for a place where she belonged exactly as she was. It had taken 5 years and a business empire to understand that home wasn't a place you inherited. It was something you created by refusing to accept less than you deserved, by building something beautiful from whatever materials you had available, by learning that love without respect was just comfortable dysfunction. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Truck number 2 is officially ordered. Thank you for believing this was possible. I smiled, thinking about all the dreams my parents were now helping nurture, all the young entrepreneurs who would never have to choose between family and ambition because someone had taught their families the difference between protection and limitation. The girl who'd left this house had been searching for someone to see her potential. The woman who'd returned had learned to see it in herself and help others find it too. And maybe that was the most successful business I'd ever built. The business of turning rejection into resilience, limitation into liberation, and fear into the fuel that powers every dream worth pursuing. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family expectations and building the life you deserve. Share this with anyone who needs to be reminded that their dreams are valid, even when the people closest to them can't see it yet. Remember, the most important approval you'll ever receive is your own.